If you care to join us, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, so our first appeal tonight is appeal number 3129. The applicant, Miguel Pena, property located at 400 South Wayne Avenue and zoned R2 residential. The applicant is seeking relief from section 280-112D and 280-112E of the code to remove the steep slopes to create usable space in the backyard. Continued from our June 16th, 2022 meeting. Is anyone here today for the applicant? Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Good evening.
Yes.
My name is Miguel Pena. Thanks for your time this evening. Thought it'd be helpful to start with just a quick recap of where we are. I was here at the first zoning board hearing I attended.
Excuse me, Miguel.
Yeah.
I think we should swear him in, or he may have been last time, but
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Yes. Miguel Pena, Miguel Pena. Thank you.
Thanks.
So when I was at the first zoning board that I attended, it was back in March. We got a continuance, and I was given direction by the zoning board two things. One was that I should get representation, which I did, and I have my engineer who's here to present the most recent plans. So that was good direction and good advice. And then the second direction I got was to try to work out some sort of agreement with a neighbor who is in opposition to the project. And I've since attempted to do that as well. Up until about 36 hours ago, I thought that my neighbor and I had at least an agreement in principle. We certainly didn't have anything in writing, formalized, but I'd engaged with him subsequently after the original zoning board hearing, and we had good dialogue. We made a lot of progress. I even included him in a call with my engineer to go through kind of some of the things that he thought should be included in the new engineered drawings for the project. Was fully transparent with him on June 3rd.
There's no objection at this point.
Isn't he a party? I'm a party.
Sure.
I'm the party. He was a party, and he can't speak to Mark. He is a party.
Okay.
Baron Gemmer. Unsuccessful negotiations are not really relevant to this board in terms of the crux of the matter here, whether we came to an agreement or not. And obviously, I'll refute what he's been saying, but
The board's going to decide one way or the other.
Okay,
and we take into account opinions of neighbors and others. So
understand. Just
Thanks.
wanted that on the record.
got it. Okay.
So, just picking up where I left off, I made every attempt to try and come to an agreement with the neighbor. On June 3rd, I thought we had an agreement in principle. I tried to outline what the agreement was in principle, and there's three things that he's asking for. The first one is stormwater management. He wanted adequate stormwater management not only for the project, but for any future projects that I may be doing at our property, which I thought was good advice. So, and I did that. In fact, you'll see when Mr. Anderson, our engineer, gets up and explains the plan, you'll see some of the future projects that we potentially may embark on. And we've sized the stormwater management system for the project adequately or big enough to account for not only this project that we're seeking relief for, but also for any future projects. So that was the first one. He asked that I oversize the stormwater management system by 50%. We think we've oversized it to an adequate level to account for all future projects. So that's number one. Number two was he wants me to put a deed restriction on my property to ensure that the property will never be subdivided into 2 lots. While I think that is a very unreasonable ask, I agreed to it. I said I would do that. I would agree to a deed restriction. The reason why I agreed to it, I will agree to it, is because in order to build 2 houses on my property and get it subdivided, I'd literally have to tear down the house that I just completely renovated to create enough buildable square footage for 2 lots. Secondly, the previous owner attempted to have it subdivided and was unsuccessful. So I have no intentions on subdividing it. I just renovated the entire property for me and my family. So I agreed to give him a deed restriction on the property to never build 2 houses on it, number 2. The third ask, which I would argue is probably the most egregious, is he wants a sidewalk. That's about 500 square linear feet of sidewalk, beginning at the one side of my driveway to the corner, wrapping around behind the house. That was a little bit too much for me. However, in the spirit of being a good neighbor and getting this deal done and getting this project done, I agreed that I would allow the sidewalk to be built. I would also hire the contractor to build it if he would pay for it, or secure the funds either through some sort of public resource to build it. That seemed to sit well with him. He asked me if I would be willing to make a contribution to it. He thought, I think he mentioned he thought he could maybe secure public funds to pay for about 70% of the sidewalk. The cost of the sidewalk, by the way, I got a quote, is $37,000. My response was, no, I'm not contributing 1 penny toward the sidewalk because A, I don't want it. He's the one that wants it. And B, I will have to maintain it and keep the snow off of it and lay down salt, during inclement weather. So I said to him, I'll agree to allow it. I think that's a huge concession. I don't think a sidewalk has anything to do with this project, but I'll do it. I sent him that email on June 3rd, and I haven't seen or spoken to him until tonight. 36 hours ago, roughly, I got an email from him saying, I don't agree, your email misrepresented our agreement, and I don't agree with the engineered plans that you shared with me. The day that I got them, by the way, I shared the plans with him that we submitted to the township for this hearing. So, unfortunately, I tried as hard as I could to get an agreement done with him, but I was unsuccessful. Nonetheless, here I am seeking relief, and I would like to introduce our engineer, John Anderson from Cornerstone, that can share the updated engineered drawings with some of the improvements that we intend to make for the project. I'd also like to remind you that, which I think is really important, I understand that in order to get relief, I need a hardship. And when we bought the house, we were told by the contractor and the engineers that there was damage to the rear foundation wall of the house, water damage. And the reason why is because the slope on the backyard, water runs off and hits the back foundation wall of the house. As part of our renovation, we blew through that foundation wall, went out about another 10 feet closer to the slope, and poured a new foundation wall. So now we're going to have the same problem again. So my hardship is I'm trying to avoid water damage to a brand new foundation wall that we recently built. So the plan is to remove steep slopes and disturb some additional steep slopes to build a retaining wall to create some flat usable space, and in the future perhaps build a patio.
Understood. Thank you for that. And I would just say to start that we really appreciate participation from neighbors in this process, and it's always helpful to have neighbors supporting your project, but you don't have to convince your neighbor to get relief here. You just have to convince us that you meet the legal requirements for a special exception or variance that you're asking for.
I understand,
Okay.
and duly noted. The only reason I brought it up is because
No, I appreciate it. It's helpful.
Part of the direction
It's
I
helpful.
got last
Yeah.
time was to try and work something out with him.
Got it.
But I do agree with you and understand. Duly noted.
Okay.
John?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were cut off at the April meeting, so I have more questions for the applicant. I don't know if we want to do that afterwards.
let him present his case. Yeah, let's do it
I didn't know if
that
we're
way.
doing it witness by witness or whatever the case.
Yeah, let's let him present his case.
One more thing, if I may. I have copies of the email thread that I'd like to submit for the record, the email thread between me and my neighbor. If I'm allowed to do that, I'd like to.
You are allowed to do it, and we'll give it the weight we feel is appropriate.
Okay. Can I do that now, or should?
Yes, why don't you hand it up? You can hand up copies to us, and we'll mark this as,
Okay.
I don't know if any exhibits, I wasn't actually here last time, so nothing was identified?
I did. Copies to the chair. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did email a copy to Kevin
Good, thank you.
yesterday, so.
Okay.
We're marking this ag?
I
I'm
think-
looking to see what we've marked prior
It's
exhibits.
probably going to be A1, I guess.
We have three already, A, B, and C are marked already.
You have a copy.
You're presenting something here,
This is an email thread between me and you.
whatever you're presenting.
Fine.
I'm sorry, this is part D.
I'm sorry?
Let's, George, let's go with.
Yeah.
Let's go with, A, we C1 for the first exhibit.
That's a good idea. We're going to call it A-C1, continuance number 1.
Thank you.
I do. Certainly. My name is John Anderson, Anderson. I'm with Cornerstone Consulting Engineers and Architectural Incorporated. We were the engineers that were hired on the application to submit for a grading permit associated with the reconstruction of the house. And also we were retained by Mr. Pena to help him out with the proceedings this evening. Again, my name is John Anderson. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I have a CV I can submit if you'd like, or we are just here to show you what we're trying to do to comply with the requirements that Mr. Pena feels that he's under and to support the application this evening. Yes. Thank you very much. Okay. So the plan that was submitted, there was 4 sheets that were submitted in support of the application. They should have been distributed to the zoning hearing board members. I'm not offering any additional modifications to those plans. The plan that's before you on the podium here is sheet 1 of 4. It's the site plan. Basically what this represents is a updated as-built survey of the building.
John, can I interrupt you? We got a few site plans, and it looks like the latest one I have is dated July 7th.
That is correct.
There was one from May, and there was one maybe from before then. So
That's
it's
correct. So
July
this-
7th?
That's correct. This is a zoning exhibit for an existing single-family house, family residence at 400 South Wayne Avenue. It's sheets 1 of 4 through 4 of 4, dated July 7th, 2022.
Thank you. And we call this AC2.
So AC2 is a site plan. It shows the property that is fronting on South Wayne Avenue. It also fronts on Conestoga Road. Conestoga Road is to the rear of the property. The main driveway access is off South Wayne Avenue. The residential house is centrally located on the property. The site plan that's before you shows the house in its general, not general, but it shows the house in its location. It also shows 2 different shading or hatching patterns which represent the steep slopes of the property. The township requires us to delineate 14 to 20% slopes and anything greater than 20%. And so what we were trying to show, one of the requests, I believe, in the previous hearings with the zoning hearing board, wanted to see what the existing steep slopes were and what was the encroachment into the steep slopes by Mr. Pena towards the rear of his house. So again, the site plan is showing the varying steep slopes that are located around the actual existing house that's out there. The site plan is showing an additional patio area to the rear of the house. One of the aspects of the discussions for this evening was additional improvements that may be wanted or desired by Mr. Pena, and that was to construct an outdoor patio. So we are showing that on the plan that's before you. In addition to that, just to the rear, between the house and Conestoga Road, is the proposed retaining wall that would then mitigate the steep slopes in the rear of the property. And just to the left of the retaining wall is a proposed shed. The additional improvements on the property would consist of stormwater management and stormwater detention to mitigate the additional impervious coverages. So to answer the question from the zoning hearing board, how much steep slopes were encroached upon, we're showing that on the site plan. There's a piece of text on the site plan that indicates, and it's a lightly shaded hatch pattern, it indicates approximately 1,537 square feet of steep slopes that were encroached upon for the construction of the retaining wall.
John, for my benefit, can you identify, there's a number of different shades of steep slopes here. Can you designate which is which?
I will. I
Okay.
think the next sheet of the plan set would help you out in distinguishing the difference of steep slopes, because
Okay.
it's an existing condition plan that has the contouring on it. And so the contouring follows, or actually is showing the steep slopes. And as you can see, with the contouring around the front of the dwelling, you can see that when the original home was constructed, it created a raised grade area, and it pushed those slopes towards South Wayne Avenue. And also, when the rear of the home was built and graded originally, it also created a series of steep slopes along the rear and to the right of the dwelling. If you are studying the contours of the existing property, most likely prior to construction of the original home, there probably was very marginal or very limited areas of steep slopes on the property. So with the construction of the original residence, it most likely created these steep slopes on the property. I know that your ordinance doesn't distinguish between man-made and man-made and naturally occurring, but I just wanted to point that out to the zoning hearing board. To answer your question, the checker pattern or the darker hatched area are slopes greater than 20%, and the single line hatch pattern are slopes of 14 to 20%. They're on the sheet 2 of 4 in the legend and abbreviations. It will show you the difference in the hatch pattern. It also shows you the areas of each of those steep slope areas on the property.
Sorry about that. Mr. Anderson, the lightly hatched area to the rear of the property where, in front of the retaining wall, can you tell the board how much of that area has already been disturbed?
So what I had indicated to the zoning hearing board, part of our process with being retained by Mr. Pena was we actually went out and surveyed that area. So this existing features plan is an updated topography of the rear of that property. And as you can see, the contour lines from the right rear of the property start to get very tight, and that's where the disturbance started. So the lighter hatch pattern on the rear right-hand side, as you extend along the rear of the existing building, I'm sorry, the left-hand side.
Point that out so you see a little more.
The rear left, I'm sorry, I was indicating the rear right, I meant the rear left of the house. As it extends along towards the point or the intersection of South Wayne Ave and Conestoga Road, it extends over to here. And that total area is approximately 1,537 square feet. Yeah, sorry.
I just want to add to Mr. Anderson's comment. There's in this whole area that Mr. Anderson just described on the plan, some of it has already been removed, and some of it either has already been slightly disturbed or potentially will be disturbed if we get the relief we need to finish the project. We've included all of that. The area that has been completely removed, Mr. Riley, to answer your question, is the shaded area immediately in front of the boulder retaining wall. That's it. And I believe that's about 700 square feet, John.
That is the steep slope.
Correct.
Different shape than the other steep
Cor-
slopes.
cor-
Make sure.
Correct, Mr. Nagel. Yes. There is some steep slope area, if you look right here, slightly behind and to the right of the wall, that has not been disturbed yet, but we included in this plan because there's potential for it to be disturbed when the heavy equipment comes in and out to move the boulders. I don't intend on removing any of that, but there's potential for it to be disturbed as part of the building of the retaining wall, so we wanted to include it in this plan to show the entire picture. Hopefully that answers
Thank
the
you.
question.
So the next sheet in our plan set is sheet 3 of 4. It's a grading utility erosion and sedimentation control plan. On the left-hand side of the page is our utility plan, and what we're trying to show in this plan view are the existing stormwater roof leaders that exist on the property today. They are basically collecting the gutter of the perimeter of the dwelling, and it's capturing that stormwater, and it's piping it around the rear of the property, rear of the existing building towards the front. They all coalesce and discharge. They're actually underground, but as the slope heads down towards South Wayne Avenue, they eventually daylight in the middle of the property. Our idea here, in order to mitigate stormwater, in order to mitigate the proposed impervious coverage, the disturbance of the slope in the rear, was also to collect those roof leaders. Obviously, if they're already in existence and we can capture with additional stormwater piping, we would then be able to capture that stormwater from the entire existing dwelling and also pipe it underneath the current driveway to an area that is located on the, we'll call it the northwestern part of the property, on the, I guess, the western side of South Wayne Avenue. That's where there's an open area that is not encumbered by steep slopes, that we can put an underground stormwater detention basin or infiltration basin in that area. Part of the due diligence of the previous application, when we were working with the developer that was reconstructing the dilapidated building that Mr. Pena bought, we had looked at varying areas for stormwater management. We had actually done infiltration testing in this area, and we do have infiltration rates to support an infiltration basin. On the right-hand side of the page was a grading and erosion sedimentation control plan. What we're trying to show on this plan are the proposed improvements with an area of earth disturbance for the construction of the retaining wall, the construction of the shed, the patio area, and then also we're showing existing areas that there's stockpile of boulders that will eventually get removed and seeded, but we're including that in our erosion and sedimentation control with silt sock and silt fencing. As we capture the roof runoff from the existing roof drains, we're showing an area of disturbance down in that, we'll call it the northwestern quadrant of the site. So the idea is to offset the proposed impervious coverage, which would include the patio, the retaining wall, and the shed, offset that by capturing the runoff from the existing dwelling and pitching it to the northwestern quadrant of the property to detain that water and meet the requirements of Radnor Township Stormwater Management Code. Just for your reference, the building area that we would be able to collect is about 2,200 square feet. The proposed patio and wall is 987 square feet, and we're looking at another 192 square feet for the shed. The patio, the retaining wall, and the shed, we wouldn't necessarily be able to collect that. However, we would be able to offset that impervious coverage by collecting the actual existing building's roof drainage. So based on the building area that we're able to collect at 2,200 square feet, the patio wall and shed that would be the increased impervious coverage, which would total just under 1,200 square feet, we're almost double. If you're just looking at an impervious coverage standpoint, we're capturing more impervious coverage than we're proposing on the property. We think we can significantly offset any additional impervious coverage that we're adding. And then also, this property doesn't have any stormwater management to it today. We would be adding a significant benefit to the township and this property by mitigating all the stormwater that's on the property.
I'd also like to add that this project was originally shut down in February. February 22nd, I believe, is when we were told to stop working. So since then, there's been an exposed wall, essentially, dirt wall, that has, for the most part, not entirely eroded, but it has somewhat eroded. We've gotten a significant amount of rain since February, and no issues with water runoff either at the house, so actually removing that steep slope has actually helped. There hasn't been, and I check every time, there's no water hitting the foundation wall of the house. And in fact, there's a large puddle that collects where the patio will be built. And it just sits there for about 24 hours and eventually percolates and dissipates. Proving to me that removing the steep slopes has certainly eliminated the problem of water runoff hitting the back foundation wall, the new foundation wall of the house. There's pictures of that puddle in one of the original exhibits submitted in the first zoning board hearing that I attended. You'll be able to see that in the slide deck.
Mr. Anderson, I have a couple more questions. At this point, this is just a plan in terms of the stormwater management. It hasn't been filed with the township yet. It's pending, presumably, action by this board, resolution of whatever issues may be with litigants.
Sorry, I didn't mean to over. So basically, yes, this is an idea of how we can mitigate the additional impervious coverage, how we can mitigate the steep slopes. And mitigating the steep slopes by constructing a retaining wall is a very acceptable practice. You see it all throughout Radnor Township. It's not just specific to this project. There's retaining walls all throughout Radnor Township. But yes, if the board would grant approval of the encroachment to steep slopes, a condition is very acceptable that we would have to file the appropriate permits through Radnor Township, either be a grading permit and any other outside agencies that may be required. I don't believe there are. We don't have a level of disturbance that would require any type of state permits, however, or county permits, I should say. But yes, we would accept the condition that we would have to go through the review process of a grading permit, stormwater management with your township engineer.
And is the proposed plan sized at a point that goes beyond what the township requirements would be? Or is it intended to satisfy what you believe to be the level of requirement that the township would impose?
In my opinion, I think we're going above the requirement for the improvements that are being shown on the plan. The proposed improvements are being shown. I believe we are definitely going beyond. We would also have to meet the rate reduction requirements, the water quality requirements, the infiltration requirements of Radnor Township, as well as the rate reduction from a pre to post development stormwater runoff method. And we would have to meet those. We're not asking for any relief of those issues or regulations with the township ordinances, but yes, I believe it goes above and beyond.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Questions from parties of interest?
I do.
Say your full name and spell.
Baron Gemmer, Barongemmer. Thank you. I know Mr. Riley was here in April when we had it. I'm trying to remember. I don't believe, obviously, and John, you were not here also. Mr. Pena gave a fairly long presentation then, so some of my questions are going to go back to that in terms of the testimony he gave at that time. I know Mr. Riley asked quite a number of questions, which I can now clarify in greater detail. So I'll do that, and then I'll ask the engineer some questions. So do we have the handheld mic for them to answer?
Think it works?
Perfect. And before I start, I don't think the application itself has an exhibit number yet. We had A, B, and C from April, but not the. Just so I'm referring to the presentation Mr. Pena gave was A at that time. The emails regarding an orange fence was B, and the Orkin report was C. And now I know we've added two, AC1 and AC2, but the application itself doesn't have one, and I would like to refer.
George, I'd suggest we go with A1. Because it was at the original,
Okay.
at the original hearing.
Thank you. And when I do my exhibits, should I just pick a letter and we'll just go numbers from there then, or how would you like to do that?
P1, 2, 3, P for protestant.
Okay, perfect. Okay, let me just put these off to the side for a second. We need to face you, don't we, know? The original presentation was stating that the amount of steep slopes to be disturbed that had already been disturbed was 300 square feet. And there was testimony given by Mr. Pena, said, it, quote, two people, Mr. Norsini, when he came out, when the day we got shut down, he came out and he took some measurements, and then I went ahead and basically tried to confirm those measurements were accurate. So my question for Mr. Pena is, I'm trying to clarify, I know that's not the number now, but there's a lot of numbers that have changed since the last, and I want to, for the credibility of some of the testimony, where did the 300, yeah, that was, the 300 number, did that come from Mr. Norsini? Did that come from measurements from Mr. Norsini? Where did that number come from?
It came from me.
Okay.
I used a tape measure in my backyard, and it was a back-of-the-napkin calculation. In fact, I think when I said the number 300, Mr. Riley, you asked me if I was an engineer, and I said, no, I wasn't, which I'm not. So since then, I have hired an engineer at the advice of Mr. Riley and confirmed the exact square footage.
Understand.
Claire, the exact square footage now is the 1,537?
Yes.
Just to clarify further, Mr. Nagel, about 700 square feet of that has been removed.
Yep.
And the balance is potentially to be disturbed.
And on that, on the diagram where you indicated the 300, now, where did you measure? Because the square footage on the diagram, and pardon me, I know these are old numbers, but I think there goes a lot to credibility because a lot of numbers have changed or were given improperly at that time, and some neighbors might have seen those. When you said the 300, the actual, let's just do this. This will be P1. What's being handed out is what Mr. Pena submitted in April, where he was saying that what the blue area, which I had blued to in order to get the area of it, that's what he was saying was 300, when in fact at the time it was even 576. And now, as has been noted, we're up to 1,500 and some. So in fairness, some neighbors may have seen the 300 and not figured they needed to come, but also this is just one of many numbers that were incorrect in the April meeting.
Are you comfortable with the current number, 1537?
Well, I'm comfortable in the sense of what Mr. Riley's question is, I don't think it's been answered totally in terms of what square footage has been disturbed totally versus what's going to be disturbed, but it seems like the final number is going to be 1,537 according to that, so.
Do you dispute that number? Did you dispute that number,
I'm-
the accuracy of the number, 1,537 square feet?
I'm not disputing in terms of what the final disturbance would be. I don't know if that's what's been disturbed because that was never indicated on any of the plans. And obviously, I didn't do a survey out there. But what he's asking relief for in total would be 1,537, whether all of that's been disturbed.
I think he's just confirming that I did a terrible job measuring in the first
No.
place. Exhibit A6 from last time, which is, again, the A was his presentation, and it looks like this, if you all have it. It talked about the year built, 1948, the gross lot size, which is fine, the 16 new trees planted. It lists the steep slopes as 9,924, which was actually, had to be corrected because the actual, he was reading for the 14% plus, the actual is only 3652. Because Mr. Pena was making the claim on that with also the 300 square feet that he was only disturbing 3% of the steep slopes. And the actual percentage, according to their calculations, are 42%. That 42% of the steep slopes on the property are being disturbed. And A17, this will become important when we get to the plan. This is a project summary where the remaining impervious coverage, he says, is 100. And where that, it's actually, I'm sorry, if you're, this is the Exhibit A from last time. It's his presentation. Do you not have copies? Mr. Lord, you look like you're. April. No, it was the it was the April meeting. Okay. On the, I don't know if I can show, maybe I can do it this way. It's listed as 100 square feet of remaining impervious coverage. And what that 100 is representing is that below 500 square feet of new impervious, you don't have to do any stormwater management. Above 500, but below 1,500, you have to do groundwater retention, and above 1,500, it's groundwater plus water quality. That 100 comes from the 500 that was originally, that you get credit, or that you start with, and then 399 was for the addition, another 5 feet was from the porch. He decided not to do the other patio, so it left 96 square feet, because those numbers need to be added to the impervious he's adding in this new plan because of the look-back period within the township. And that's, so it's important to understand where we are, because the current numbers will actually go over the 1,500, so we need to keep that in mind. But this is roughly correct. It should be 96. Originally, he said the wall was going to be 90 square feet in terms of adding toward the impervious, and we now know that's 395. So it's grown by more than 4 times in terms of his estimate. He got that from his landscaper, but that was, that's obviously been updated. The other thing to note here is the 4 feet of the maximum height of the wall, because I'll be talking about that later. May I make a comment?
No.
I don't know that we have to go through this past history. We have engineered prepared plans in front of us.
Well-
And let's just assume all the old stuff wasn't right, and let's go with this?
Well, but you also understand, if you weren't, Mr. Riley might be able to chime in here. These slopes were disturbed by supposedly because a orange fence was in the wrong place, because he thought he could disturb anything outside and inside the orange fence. I mean, there's for those of you who weren't at the first meeting, there's a lot of history here that goes to the credibility of why these were disturbed to begin with, and then why they needed to be disturbed, which I'll go into.
Yeah, we know he did it and he wasn't supposed to. We know that. Right?
But what about the, but the reasons why he said he did it, that's what I'm
Baron,
going
you should focus on
Right.
the reasons why he shouldn't get relief under the Radnor zoning regulations.
all right, I will.
Let's focus on that.
One of the things that I will hand out, though, is Mr. Riley was asking about the grading permit last time, so I'm just going to hand that out. That'll be P2, just so you'll have that, because, and then I'll move on to this after that. Mr. Nagel, I appreciate those comments, but by the same token, then I would expect that the negotiations not to be relevant to this situation. Yes, they are not. Okay, thank you. Okay, just wanted to make sure. P2, yes, P2. And the things to notice here on the second, so this was approved, this was on March 30th of last year. The things to note here, again, are you can look at the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth column on the second page, the added impervious, which shows the 399 of the building, the 5, which is really the front porch, and then the patio, which is 90, is no longer being done. So it adds up to 409 now, as opposed to with what he's adding. The other thing to note here is that if you look at some of the pictures, you see that there was a considerable amount of soil left that might have contributed toward what Mr. Pena was talking about his initial situation. And that soil should not have been left there, because if you take the 399 of the new addition, and it was dug to, I'm just surmising, but 399 square feet of addition dug to a 7.5 depth, that cubic footage actually equals the 111 cubic yards that they're estimating here, and that was to all be taken off site. And so in a number of the pictures, you see that there was still a good amount of dirt left on there sloping toward the house, and that's part of the hardship he's claiming. And that hardship shouldn't have been there if the grading plan had been followed and all the dirt had been taken off. A number of those pictures show it sloping directly toward the house. So that's all I have on that one. Pardon me while I make sure I skip the parts that you don't want. Let's see here. Oh, what I will, because I will reference these, that was the grading permit, and this will be P3, which is the actual plans. The last 4 pages are the plans, not at 8.5 by 11 size. The first 4 pages are enlarged versions of the appropriate plans that we'll need to look at. The one thing which you probably know, on the existing features plan, which is the page 2, as you'd probably guess, that the steep slopes are designated by the elevation lines, and they go along there, which I'm going to contrast with what we're going to see in the current plans. Again, I won't dwell on that because there's other points I was going to make otherwise. And that's all we did there. So but I will refer to that later. Okay, move on from there. One thing that was brought up last time in terms of the township, claiming the township had knowledge, again, this was an interchange with Mr. Riley about the length of the wall and the width of it, and the gist of it was, does the township know about this? And he said, it was filed by my landscaper, he filed an application, and we got shut down. Supposedly, a application was filed for the wall itself. I did a right to know. There was no, other than the grading and the clearing and the fence permit, there was nothing. So I just wanted to know if the applicant has any evidence they're offering that a landscaping or a wall application or permit was issued.
I don't have any evidence on me tonight, no.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry, do you have it anywhere?
Mr. Riley, I'm not sure. My landscaper was here at the original zoning board hearing, and he told me he filed a permit for the wall. So I was just going by his word. I never bothered to look, to be honest, or go back and check. I never thought it was important.
Did he actually get a permit, or did he just file the application?
I don't know. I assume he got the permit because he began the excavation to do the work.
Yeah, because that was part of the exchange that Mr. Riley asked when that was, and you said it was in February. We got that shut down in February. And the question was after the removal of the steep slopes. No, it was before the removal. So my question is, if you never saw the permit, or I guess your landscaper never got it, but you still started the work at that point?
I said I never saw the permit, but I believed my landscaper when he told me he had a permit to begin the excavation.
Okay. And I'll just say that I did file a right to know, and the only permits for this year were the grading, clearing, and the fence permit. One of the comments you made at the meeting was, you talked about how it was an honest mistake. You said, it was an accident. If I would have known, we wouldn't be here, because if the fence was installed at the toe of the steep slopes, I wouldn't be building a retaining wall, which is what I'm here to get a variance for. So can you explain that if that fencing was in the, according to you, the appropriate area, what would you have done in February, March, and April then?
So after the steep slopes were removed, the township engineer came out and had a conversation with me and my landscaper. And his comments were, the steep slopes are removed.
I'm sorry, let me just interrupt. That's not my question. My question is, if the fencing had been in the right place, because your contention was you could disturb anything inside, and that's why you disturbed the steep slopes. If it had been in the right place, so you didn't disturb what you currently have disturbed, what would you have done in February and March?
Nothing. The township engineer said to me that the orange fence, the orange construction fence, was installed in the wrong place. Had it been installed at the toe of the steep slope, then I would have known that I can't excavate in front of the orange fence, and therefore nothing would have happened.
But would you still be claiming a hardship? Would we still be-
Absolutely. Which, if I may comment, you made a comment that the hardship didn't exist prior to the excavation. So,
No, I'll have questions on that later. Okay, I'm sorry, then go ahead.
the damage to the original foundation wall of the house, the hardship that I'm claiming is the damage to the original foundation wall of the house was a result of years of water runoff. I mean, you're talking about a foundation wall of a house. Years of water runoff caused the damage. We then came in and excavated to expand the basement, and then that excavated soil was dumped on top of the steep slope. Mr. Gemmer is claiming that the hardship wasn't there before that excavation took place. It's not true. The damage to the retaining wall was due to years of water runoff from the original steep slope. This excavated soil for the basement happened after.
Do you have any evidence that you've submitted that that damage existed prior to this?
Sure. I mean, you could look at the Orkin report alone can tell you that.
Well, we can talk about, if you want to talk about the Orkin report, we can, but I don't believe that says that.
Well, look, he's testifying, and that's evidence. okay?
I understand. I'm
We'll
just
give it-
asking if
we'll
you had
give it
any-
appropriate weight.
I just was asking if there's any written evidence for
And
that.
I've asked you before to get to the issue here.
All right, well, let
Why
me-
is he not entitled to relief?
All right. Let me get to the hardship. And
We've been requested to have a 5-minute break here.
Okay.
So we'll reconvene at 7:56, very short.
okay, thank you.
We'll start up in a minute. All right, we'll get started. Just one thing, we're trying to establish that what we just witnessed was your cross-examination of
Well,
the applicant's
well, that's
witness?
what I was trying to do it in order when before.
And now you're putting your case on in
Well,
chief?
I see a muddle here, so I didn't know what you've been wanting. That's why I wanted to try and do Miguel from last time first, then let the engineer go on and do that, so.
Okay, so where are we now?
Well, you tell me how you want to proceed, because it's kind of gotten a little muddled.
Explain to me why he shouldn't get relief. I think we talked about credibility issues. I think we've probably heard as much as we need to hear. So if
No,
you
that's what I'm getting to.
If you have a half hour of credibility issues,
No, I understand.
Don't-
That's
yeah.
why you see me scrambling here to
Yeah.
thin things out in
okay.
terms of that.
Well, let's hear your case in
Yes,
chief.
and if I may, as I do it, there may be occasional question for the applicant. That's the best way to do it at this point, given how it's been. You tell me.
Yeah, we'll do the best we can to accommodate everybody.
Gotcha.
Within reason,
Understand.
okay?
Gotcha.
Thanks.
One of the hardship the applicant's claiming is the stormwater issues. And so one thing in terms of the importance of that to him that I would like to demonstrate, or lack thereof, is first, the application itself, in terms of why he wants this relief. It says removal of steep slopes to create usable space in the backyard. And then I'm also now handing out another exhibit, which is an email he sent to the neighbors back in February 21st, where it says, we began to construct a retaining wall in our backyard with large I'm sorry, Norm. We began to construct a retaining wall in our second paragraph, for those that are following along, to construct a retaining wall in our backyard with large boulders so we can get a small amount of flat, usable lawn space for our kids. So no mention of stormwater in the application for zoning relief, and no mention in this in February after the work had already started. So please take that into account in terms of the importance he's placing on it. Yeah. P4, I'm sorry if I didn't mention that. Yes, P4. Is it? What was P4?
Copies of the plan?
Let's double check here. P3 was this. That was P3.
Okay. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
so
Okay.
P4, so it is
Okay,
P4.
I missed one.
Sorry.
So the grading permit was P2?
The grading permit was P2, correct.
Thank you, sorry.
Okay. So now to the hardship he's claiming, which is the stormwater. This is a quote from, or excuse me, first from the Orkin report, which is Exhibit C. It mentioned that this was due to poor grading and drainage, which at the time, the steep slopes had already been removed, so I'm not sure what they were referring to, but if you look at that report, things were still within reasonable bounds there. But what I want to get to is the alternatives that he could have tried before this. Last time he testified, so my goal in this project was to try and get the water as far away from the house as possible, so with proper grading toward the retaining wall. So now I do have a question for him is, did you consider just grading away from the house toward the steep slopes, or putting in a seepage bed in the backyard or near the steep slopes?
I did, and after giving it much consideration, I thought about what we really needed in this property, A, to mitigate the hardship, and B, to make it livable. So I looked at it as a full project. The Orkin report confirmed the moisture levels in the basement, which confirmed to me that we have not gotten rid of the hardship. you know, I needed to grade, do some additional grading away from the house, even after removing the steep slopes, which is what we fully intend on doing when the boulder wall is built.
But you also testified last time that they told you you needed a moisture barrier, so there could have been other factors contributing to the moisture in the basement,
I installed a moisture barrier.
but not before the Orkin report.
No, I installed it after.
No, understand, just,
I didn't know I needed a moisture barrier until the Orkin report.
so, again, that sentence was to try and get the water as far away from possible. So this is a blown-up version of the 7-7 plan that you just got. It's the page 3 of 4, the grading and erosion sedimentation plan. And what I've highlighted in yellow there, P5, yes, if I didn't mention that already. Those are steep slopes that are being, this is what the plan is to grade based upon the plans that have been submitted. Here you have steep slopes that are even closer than any of the other steep slopes existed before. So if that was truly a concern, I'm not sure why these would have been, and these are regraded. These are, because you can see the top line, the top dotted line. You have a copy? I'm sorry. That the top of the yellow line is actually closer to the house. So this is what's regraded, and this is what's planned to be graded. So if that's such a concern, it would seem to me that would be the worst thing, because it's even closer than some of the others are. Because you can see take away the patio, and all the other older steep slopes were much farther away. So moving on to the new plan itself. If you look at the, here, I'll actually, do I have this? I don't need to hand this out. If you just look at your 7-7 plan, the existing features plan, and you see that there's a 453 elevation line toward the middle and the bottom, and then you see where that hits where all the lines run together there. Well, because the 448 elevation is near the house, that's going to be about a 5-foot that's a 5-foot difference when you get to that 453 line, which is where the boulder wall is going to be. The boulder wall is only going to be 4 feet tall, as he said, per the maximum. So there's going to have to be grading either in front of it, behind it, which, if you have to move a foot, even if you're doing that in 5 feet, that's creating another steep slope, pushing water either toward the wall or over the wall, but that's not indicated in the plans anywhere. The calculation, and let me just ask Mr. Anderson, did you say that this was just, I'm sorry, you might have to, let me go over here. I'll just ask him from blind spot. The bed that's created there, is that just groundwater recharge, or is that a full-blown water quality, more than 1,500 square feet per Radnor code handled?
The exhibit that we're showing here is the idea that we would handle and comply with all the stormwater management regulations of Radnor Township.
My question is, are you handling the ones that are between 500 and 1,500, or the ones above 1,500?
Rephrase your question.
In Radnor, if you add more than 500 impervious, you have to do a groundwater recharge. If you go above 1,500, which is a plan you've done for this property before.
What I indicated to you is that there are infiltration rates in that area, and I believe that we can comply with the water quality, the recharge component, and also the pre to post rate reduction for all the storms.
Okay, so if you were above 1,500, this would qualify as the full-blown that you would need for that.
That's correct.
Okay, because the numbers do add up to above 1,500 if you look at what has been added. The wall at 375, the patio at 612, the shed at 192, added on to the two numbers of 399 and 5, 399 for the addition and 5 for the front porch, are 1,583. So it would have to comply with the more full-blown one, and it wasn't apparent to me on the engineering plans that was the case.
Yeah, but what I indicated is that the building that we're taking the roof runoff from is 2,200 square feet. So again, we're still showing that we're capturing more than the impervious coverage that is proposed.
I understand that.
Also, I want to point out that you had indicated that we're disturbing 42% of the slopes. We're actually disturbing 15% of the total steep slopes on the property. Just want to clarify that.
No, you're disturbing 42% of the steep slopes on the property.
No, we're not.
14% and above doesn't count as steep slopes. That,
The ordinance actually indicates that we're supposed to show steep slopes in excess of 14%.
no, you're supposed to show slopes in excess of 14%, steep slopes are 20%.
All right, next point.
Yeah. And still a question for Mr. Anderson. You mentioned that it's covering the roof. So is that all of the roofs of the house, or are there some that aren't being handled?
I believe we're not picking up the garage, so
Okay.
it's just the main structure, not including the garage.
Okay. And stay up here because
I'm not walking away.
The gutters on one side of the garage are piped
Okay.
Now, in terms of, this is where I showed the steep slopes that are close to the foundation now. Is the intent that this slopes down here, that water hitting this wall would be directed to go this way as opposed to through the wall and trying to make it way to the patio or to the house? Will the wall act as a redirector for some of the slope area behind it where the water is flowing?
It's potential that it would. It's a dry stack boulder wall with aggregate behind it. It will allow water to pass through. I just want to point out to the board that, as indicated in my testimony previously, we are showing that we're disturbing 1,537 square feet of steep slopes. We understand that the construction of the retaining wall and the area to the right of the end of the retaining wall will also be part of that area disturbance. We're trying to present to the board that there are areas above just the wall that would be disturbed for the construction of that, and those areas potentially would be regraded. This is an exhibit to the board to show how the wall can be constructed and how we can mitigate stormwater that would be generated from the impervious coverage that's proposed, and also capture impervious coverage that already exists on the property. We would still have to go back before Radnor Township to apply for full grading permits. Additional information would be presented within that plan set.
Okay. This still might be questions for you, but.
I also want to point out the area behind the wall is not steep slope. It's less than 14%.
With that said, though, because the wall is only 4 foot and the grading's 5 foot, there has to be a 1 foot difference somewhere put in. This is a report actually produced by
P6.
Mr. Anderson here for a P6, I'm sorry, thank you. Produced by Mr. Anderson for a prior incarnation of this property, about 3 years before this one was there. I'm going to point your attention first to the second paragraph under existing conditions. It says, currently there's no stormwater management on the site. Oh, sorry. Currently there's no stormwater management on site. Runoff from the site flows via sheet flow to the neighboring property to the west in South Wayne Avenue. So here and here. My first question based upon that is, as you said, some water may be redirected based upon the wall because this is an elevation line here, and so it's still downhill that way, downhill that way, downhill that way. So the water that's already going on the neighboring property via sheet flow per your report is going to be exacerbated by both this shed and by whatever water may redirect here. Is that, any comment on that?
No, I don't believe that the shed would cause that much additional stormwater that it would project stormwater off onto the neighboring properties to the right. I'm sorry, to the left. The contouring shows that if the shed is built on that property or on that location, it's going to sheet flow directly to the driveway. The driveway basically sheet flows directly to South Wayne Avenue.
But you said in this report it was going to the neighborhood.
This report that we're showing here is a general characteristic of the property. It was a 2018 report for a previous application. I'm not sure that that's actually appropriate for this plan set.
I'd also like to add that the location of the shed was actually at the advice of Mr. Gemmer through our discussions.
If there was going to be
And-
stormwater management.
And we can completely eliminate the shed, because I don't need it that bad. So if it becomes an issue or the crux of this relief, then I will agree to never build a shed in this location.
We have testimony that all stormwater requirements will be satisfied, and any relief here would be based on that.
Yes, but also part of your standard relief for variance is that it doesn't have a detrimental effect on
I
neighboring
understand that.
properties. So
I
that's why,
understand.
that's the reason I'm bringing that point up.
Okay.
And Mr. Pena, he wanted, I didn't necessarily suggest the shed there. That's where he wanted it because it was the most out of the way place, but.
We don't need the dark.
I know. Well, I'm sorry,
Okay.
it happened once. and-
Any further points?
Yes, I do. What did we, P6 or P7? Which, I'm sorry, can somebody make sure I'm not getting the wrong exhibit?
The next would, P7.
P7, okay. And this should pretty much wrap it up then. I'm going to refer back to P6 for 1 second, then we'll go to P7 because they relate. Under the proposed condition, first paragraph on P6,
I'm sorry, what date was this prepared?
this was September 10th, 2018. I know you
All
can't
right,
see that.
it's not relevant.
Yeah.
Go on to your next
Yeah,
point.
no,
It's not relevant.
I disagree.
Well, next
I mean, I
point.
understand-
Noted, let's move on.
Okay, well, the standard of hardship is what's the minimum relief necessary? And what I'm showing is a plan that was for this property.
It was a
less-
proposed plan that never happened.
It was approved.
It wasn't, this
Is
has nothing
is
to
it
do
the
with
plan
what's
in front of this board right now? If it's not the plan in front of this board right now, it has little probative value, we're going to move on.
Okay. I'll just use that in my wrap, though, because and I'll give my closing now. The hardship that's been presented is we have stormwater. So the question is, what's the minimum relief, whether that's, and I presented evidence to whether that was even foremost in his mind. The question is, what's the minimum relief necessary? And I'm showing that there was an alternate plan approved for this property that didn't require disturbing any steep slopes whatsoever. That's it. So what I'm trying to show you is that A, the minimum relief is nothing, and B, that if you approve the shed or even with the wall there, that there's, under the variance standard, there's going to be a detrimental effect to some of the neighbors over there.
Understood.
And let me just check to see if anything else, otherwise I will happily sit down. Yeah, and even without that plan, if it wasn't for the usable space he wanted for his children, a seepage bed right next to the steep slopes or grading away from the house would have worked fine, but that wasn't what he wanted. But it would have solved the problem, which is not particular to this property.
That's a relevant point.
Yeah,
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Gemmer from Mr. Pena?
No.
Any questions from the board for Mr. Gemmer?
No.
Any questions from the audience or public? Thank you, Baron. Appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to give you a chance for rebuttal, a short rebuttal, please.
Thanks, Mr. Nagel. I have no rebuttal. I just want, in closing, I'd like to just clarify that the shed is considered a future project, and that's not what I'm here for tonight. I'm here for relief to be able to build this boulder retaining wall. The patio is also a future project, and I understand that I will need to go in for a permit in order to complete or build those future projects. I would consider eliminating the shed. I would consider making a smaller patio if I needed to. We just tried to come up with a plan that we can put in front of you in good faith and show that we're trying to do the right thing here in terms of stormwater management and, ultimately so we can get the relief we need to build this retaining wall, and I can have mitigate the hardship and have usable space for me and my family.
Okay,
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And the focus today is the steep slope request. There's no request regarding variances from setbacks or anything like that for a patio. We're not dealing with the patio today. We're dealing with the steep slopes.
That's correct.
Yes. Or the shed. Or the shed.
Or the shed. That's correct.
Thank you. Okay. No further questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman, I think the parties need to move their exhibits into the record.
Granted.
I'd like to move to have my record, exhibits made part of the record.
Make the exception for 7.
And with P7 stricken from the record. And Mr. Pena just asked us to,
Yeah,
To present-
I'd like to make a motion to
present
move
your
my
exhibits.
my exhibits into the record. Yes, thank you.
I'll ask, okay, I'll ask for a motion at this point in time. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, perhaps a question. While it's generally not been this board's practice to do so, we are permitted to deliberate and basically return back out and report out our finding. Is this an
Yes, we are.
appropriate case for considering that course of action as opposed to public deliberation between the members of the board?
In my opinion, no, but I'll leave it up if the majority of folks think we need to discuss.
We're willing to defer to a fellow member,
Yeah.
so I don't feel strongly about it, but Mr. Riley,
Can you use your mic?
I'm sorry. I don't feel strongly about it, but I'm always willing to defer to a fellow member, especially one that's served on the panel of the board much longer than I have.
And
Esteemed member.
Esteemed member.
And I just want to confirm with the solicitor that my characterization is correct and we can proceed in that fashion.
No, you are correct. We could absolutely, if you wanted to, go into
Yeah.
executive
Well,
session, especially with solicitors.
Upon further reflection, let's take a 5-minute break. We'll be back shortly.
I wasn't sure.
Okay, so where we were, I would ask for a motion to be made by a member of the board.
I'll make a motion that we approve the applicant's request for a variance as requested in his appeal number 3129.
I'll second that.
Okay, there's a motion, it's been seconded to approve the application. Any discussion, board members?
To me, I look at this in the context of, we all know our codes are not the best sometimes. So you look at what's the purpose of the code, and in fact, I think the plans that have been put before us, more than satisfy the intent of the code. They will make things better for the community and the neighbors, not worse. And so I'm going to vote yes for this.
Any other discussion?
This case is the poster child for how not to get a variance in Radnor Township. I just want everybody at home, viewing in, to make note of this. Unfortunately, I think this is an instance of an applicant that felt more comfortable asking for forgiveness rather than permission, which is why we're in the mess we're in right here. I'm guided, and Mr. John Nagel's comments are well taken in this regard. I don't know what purpose would be served by not granting the relief that has been requested by the applicant. The property was developed once. It was an eyesore for years and years and years and years and years. And, an applicant, a homeowner came to purchase the property and make improvements on the property, and it is no longer the eyesore that it used to be, which is not in and of itself a basis for granting relief. But on the entirety of the testimony that's been provided and this, my understanding of what the relief is intending to do and the effects that it may or may not have on the surrounding neighborhood, I feel that while I'm not entirely excited about voting in favor of this motion, I will do so because in sum and substance, the granting of the relief is ultimately going to provide a property owner the ability to fully as they care to, enjoy the use of their property. And if doing so is not detrimental to the neighbors, the surrounding neighborhood, or the sensibilities, if you will, of the members of this board and the members of the community, then I don't think we should stand in the way of that in this instance. So that's why I'll be voting in favor of the motion.
Yeah, I think, one of the items here, the applicant, proceeded with disturbing steep slopes, whether it was his fault or not, but that's what happened, and did not get the required variance to do that. And there may or may not be penalties imposed by the township or other ramifications for his actions, but that's not our job here. And we're trying to determine, if there is a hardship here, and to the extent that there's any negative effects on the neighborhood regarding this project, and based on the testimony, I think a hardship was established. The testimony we heard was that the foundation was damaged from the water runoff from the backyard, and the testimony was that, in effect, this has fixed that problem. And with the required stormwater additions, it looks to me like a benefit to the neighborhood. So I will also vote in favor. So,
Mr. Chairman?
yes.
Just real quick, and you just touched on it, there was testimony about additional stormwater management. I did not hear that in motion, just so that staff has an understanding if that is part of the approval.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I thought about that once he said that, and I was going to amend the motion to, and maybe we don't even need to say this, maybe it goes without saying, that they have to meet all stormwater requirements established by the township. Would you accept that as an amendment to your motion?
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you. So the motion as amended, we'll have a vote on that. John? Sorry. Aye. Aye. John?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
And I also vote in favor, so the vote is 4-0 in favor of the applicant. Good luck with your project, and thank you for coming tonight. Thank you. Thank you, Baron. All right, where's the next one? Okay, the next applicant, appeal number 3136, 148 Partners LLC, property located at 140-148 East Lancaster Avenue in Zone WBOD. The applicant seeks a special exception under Section 280-101A of the code, which requires a special exception for a change of non-residential occupancy. The applicant also seeks such other relief required consistent with the exhibits and testimony presented. This is also continued from the June 16th, 2022 meeting.
Evening.
Good evening.
Nick Keneally representing the applicant on this matter. This is a property I'm sure all of you are familiar with. It's the 3.5-story, 3 stories are facing Lancaster Avenue brick building right next to the Gap. It's been used for years and years and years as an office building. I believe Bell Telephone or one of the telephone companies were in there for a long period of time. I know that financial services were in there for a period of time. And I know, and I'm dating myself here, back in the early 80s, we looked at it as potential office for law offices as well, and it's being used for commercial purposes at that time as well. From looking at the county records, it was built around 1950, although we think it probably was older than that if you look at old pictures of Wayne. What changed here is the WBOD came into effect around 2007 and made the first floor of that premises non-conforming because the WBOD says you cannot have offices on the first floor, but you could have offices on the second and third floor. So it made the first floor offices non-conforming. You'll see in the exhibit packet that it was purchased by the current owners back around 2018, 2019, and they came in and asked for relief to convert the first office to a residence. That relief was granted, but they didn't act on it. They did remove asbestos from the property, from the entire property, because there was an asbestos problem. They did clean out the asbestos. They never acted on the relief to turn it into a residence. And also that relief also granted them relief to construct an addition to the building, which also was not constructed. And there's no proposal here to renew that request for construction of addition. The proposal here is to use the first floor for offices under the new owner, 148 Partners LLC. So swear in, Mario. I do.
Mario Martinez, M-A-R-I-O, Martinez, M-A-R-T-I-N-E-Z.
Mario, what's your relationship to the applicant 148 Partners LLC?
I am the managing member.
And did you enter into an agreement of sale with the current owner, Waystone Group LLC?
That is correct.
And we have marked that agreement of sale as Exhibit 2A in the exhibit packet?
That's right.
And also, we have marked as Exhibit A2, the deed to the property indicating that Williamstone Group LLC is the current owner of the property. Is that right?
Correct.
You heard me testify. How long has this building been in existence there in Wayne? I know we talked a little bit about it tonight. We
Yeah.
thought it was before 1950 even.
Yeah, I think public record says 1950, but I've seen pictures of downtown Wayne in the early 30s, 1930s, and it looks like the building was there. So I don't exactly have a date for the construction of the building, but certainly it's been there for a long time.
And to your knowledge, it's always been used as an office building.
It has, yes.
I'm going to show you, and unfortunately, this is a black and white version of it, but I think the board's totally familiar with the property here. And I believe.
Is this
you have-
A3?
This is A3. You have the colored version for whatever reason. You know, my version is black and white. Lancaster Avenue, on which the building fronts. There are, it is located in this area here on Mario, you should be testifying here.
Yeah,
so
that's
you know where
correct.
it's located.
It's right there.
Okay.
It's a building that's a standalone. It's got 2 drive aisles on both sides to access the parking in the back.
You want to take this exhibit?
Sure. I got it. Thank you so much.
Now he's going to do that. Stop.
Sorry, I probably didn't make enough colored copies when I gave them all to the board.
Yeah.
So it's this area here, which is directly across from Wingwood Avenue.
That's correct.
All right. And then you're right on the main block in Wayne, and the currently abandoned Gap store is to
Right
the
next-
west of you.
that is
right
correct.
next to it, adjacent. And there are some other uses, as we are aware, in Wayne here. We also know there are non-conforming office uses as well in Wayne
Yes.
that predated the WBOD.
That is correct.
And I'll just show you what's been marked also as A4. And A4 is the zoning relief that we had talked about previous by the board that was granted the prior owner. And that indicates, as I had stated during opening, that the first floor relief was granted to convert the first floor to a residence, and also relief was granted both times, special exceptions to construct an addition to the building.
That's correct.
Nick,
Well,
I got a
just-
question for you on that point, if you don't mind.
Sure.
The literal reading, I take it that a building permit was never issued.
That is correct. So technically, it's expired.
It expired, so does that mean that as a result of that, this is, as the building sits there now, with the first floor as an office, it's a non-conforming grandfathered use?
Correct.
Right.
The only difference in everything, John, as he hit on it, was this zoning relief. That's the only thing that's really changed. As I said, and Mary, I'll just ask you real quickly, and you've been in the building, is there anything else in the building that has changed since this zoning opinion?
I don't know. I don't believe so.
I mean, how about asbestos removal?
That's the only thing that they did. Yeah, they had the plans to convert the entire building into a single-family home. And in order to design it, they figured they would look into what's there. They figured out that there was asbestos, so they removed it. And then they never actually moved forward with building the house. So the building sat empty for some time.
So they've never received a building permit for residential use?
Not that I'm aware of.
They've
Did
never
they
rec-
ever use it as an office on the first floor? If you know.
I don't believe so, no. I think the intentions were there to convert the property, but for whatever reason, they decided not to move forward with those plans.
And
So it's never been used for residential purposes?
It's never been used for residential
But
purposes.
has it been used for office space, at least as far as the first floor is concerned?
Oh, in the past?
The entire, what we understand to be the entire existence of this property, it's always been an office building.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is, a non-conforming use has been abandoned for over a year?
That's why we're here.
Yeah.
Well-
That's why we're here.
Yeah, I guess the question would be, has it,
So it's no longer a non-conforming use, it's just,
well, it's still non-conforming in that, well, if it's a residence, it's non-conforming. If it's,
Yeah, full disclosure, when I had the intention to purchase the property, I looked into the history of it, and it's always been used as an office building, and that's my intention, to continue to use it as an office building. But when we looked at the zoning decision, we had that conversation with Kevin and said, well, there's a couple different ways to look at this. And that's why we are in front of you guys tonight.
Did I understand, I don't know the answer to the question, do I understand that if it's not used as an office on the first floor for a period of a year, that it's deemed abandoned?
well, there has to be an intent to abandon. I mean, it's not just merely.
You mean like going to the zoning hearing board and getting a variance for residential use?
Well, and that was kind of Kevin's comment when, of course, Kevin and I went back and forth on this, was that they did proceed to the zoning hearing board for the variance, but the point of the question is never, as John picked up, is it's never been used for a residence, and they never even got a permit to use it for a residence, which means technically, it's a point that
There's nothing
that we
in the
stumble
prior
over.
grant of zoning relief that required them to go and use it as a residential use. They had the ability to do so, but apparently they did not do so.
They did not do so, and I guess technically it expired because they did not do so and did not get the relief that was necessary, or any of the permits to do it.
Then the question is there sufficient evidence that there was an intent to abandon the use as an office space on the first floor?
And I guess that's kind of why we're here. I mean, one would be, has the use actually been abandoned? And that's why I presented the testimony as to, has any permits been approved? Has any, anything been done? And anticipating this, I do have some case law, regarding it. Anticipating that this question was probably going to come up. I mean, I mean, it makes sense, obviously, to turn this into back to office, because it's always been office, but, I understand what,
I think that.
the mission of this
I think-
board is.
Well, what I'm hearing, I think that it has been established that the non-conforming residential use has been abandoned. Purposely.
Yeah, that's
Right.
correct, yeah.
So what does it become then? Does it automatically revert back to office use or, just a nothing?
I think once you make the assumption that another use was abandoned, I think that paints you into a corner in terms of whether the initial non-conforming use was abandoned. So I don't think this is an issue to get hung up on, frankly, but we'll talk about that. But if you assume that the residential use was abandoned, then you have to assume that the prior non-conforming office use on the first floor was also abandoned.
I wouldn't
You
make
can
that
only
leap.
have one non-conforming use at a time, please.
Right.
Do you have any case law on this?
I do, yeah. So, again, I went figuring the issue of abandonment was going to come up with all the lawyers on the board, I did pull up 3 cases. The first case, I think, is the one that deals with the whole issue of abandonment was established by the Supreme Court back in 1998, and that was Latrobe. It was a Latrobe Speedway, I guess it was up in Latrobe, and there was a speedway, and it hadn't been used for years and years, and the question was whether it was ever abandoned. And so the Supreme Court said it was not structurally dismantled, so therefore it was not abandoned. And so even though I think it was 12 years not used for, that's the first one that I'll hand up.
You entering this, or?
I can enter them as exhibits. That would be A8. A9, this is, Heichel is the case. It is cited as 830, a second, 1081. And this one was, it was a salvage yard, and again, wasn't used for years. And it basically, this case stands for the proposition that there's no abandonment when there's no attempt to convert it to another use. And that kind of goes with, was the use abandoned, the non-conforming office use abandoned, since there was really no attempt to convert it to another use. Even, again, I know they made requests for zoning hearing relief, but outside of that, there was no other attempt to convert it to the residential use.
And if I can note, I believe that this request for relief was made before they actually had a full feasibility study on what it would take to convert this building into residential. So you could theoretically want to convert something just by looking at the outside of it, but once you get into it, I think they realized it was potentially not feasible to do so.
I get that, but depending on what the court in this particular case considers to be an attempt to convert.
Right.
I mean, obviously, they couldn't do any conversion until they had the zoning relief that they needed.
Right.
So, you know, the first step was perhaps the obtaining that relief, but that's.
One thing is, I mean, there's an expiration date on the grant of the, what was it, special exceptions. That's there for a purpose. And it's a return of the situation to the status quo that existed prior to the grant. Otherwise, what's the purpose of having a drop-dead date on it?
The other case that I'll hand up is, I'll mark it as A10, and that's Associated Contractors case versus Upper Darby Township. That's another Pennsylvania Supreme Court case, 391 PA 347. And this case stands for, again, kind of similar to the case I just handed up. There was no physical, again, talking about abandonment. And like this case, there was no physical changes to the building and no attempt to alter the basic character of the building, which is the same as this case. And in that case, they also mentioned that there was no abandonment as a result.
The first case you handed up, which is Latrobe Speedway versus Zoning Hearing Board of Unity Township, Supreme Court case, on, well, it's page 6 of the opinion. I'm not sure what the actual number is. It says the burden of persuasion then rests with the party challenging the claim of abandonment. So, I mean, nobody's here, I don't think anybody's claiming abandonment. I mean, I don't think you are, right, Nick?
We're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd probably be the township doing that, but,
I don't know.
well, Nick, in your reading of these cases, did you see anything regarding guidance as to, you know, our situation where you had a non-conforming use which was available because of zoning ruling, and that use was abandoned, that it automatically goes back to the prior non-conforming use?
Yeah, I could not, I looked, obviously, I couldn't find anything where someone went to a zoning board and
Yeah.
got relief to convert it to another use.
It just makes sense that that would be the result, but
Yeah, I think
curious.
it just stands with the proposition that, again, just not using it for years, we know, does not necessarily establish abandonment.
that's the intent.
Yeah, it's the intent here. And in this case, is what these cases stand for is the fact that no active action, no change was made to the building that would indicate any intent to abandon the prior nonconforming use. So that's kind of what we're relying on here. And, I totally get it. It's kind of an interesting question, and, I struggled with how to approach it with this board, actually, on,
Yeah, is that it, Mario?
One more comment, too. I don't know, and Kevin, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that the township would take an opposing view on it either. I think we would have to be here regardless, whether this was not an issue. As you know, the building down the road just changed from a non-conforming use to another non-conforming use. It happened to be a real estate office to a new real estate office. So we would be here regardless. I think it was just, kind of like trying to figure out the best way to present it in the first place, why we presented it the way we did.
Yeah. Just curiosity, assuming you get relief, what's your plans for the first floor? Do you have
Just
tenants?
continuing the office use for the entire building.
Do you have tenants, or?
We're working with a group of tenants. I believe this building has always been financial services, and it looks like it will continue to be financial services.
Okay. Just curious.
and just to close out the record here, I've marked as A5, which is the plot plan for the property, A6, A7 are photographs of the property, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Again, I think everyone's familiar with the property, so.
Yeah,
I don't
got it. Okay.
And that's all I would have asked the exhibits to be made part of the record.
I'm sorry?
I would ask the exhibits to be made part of the record.
Yes. Granted. Any questions from board members for the witness?
I don't think.
Okay. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion from the board.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the applicant be granted the requested special exception from a prior non-conforming office use to a new non-conforming office use in accordance with testimony and plans and discussion of case law presented here this evening.
Second.
Okay, any board discussion? Okay, we'll have a board vote. John Nagel?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
The other John?
Aye.
And I'm also in favor, 4-0 in favor of the applicant. Good luck, Mario.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Have a good evening.
I always say, hold on to the case law. Okay, next applicant, number 3139, Jeremy and Irene Michael, property located at 180 Wentworth Lane and zoned R3 residential. Applicant requests a variance from section 280-25D1 to permit an aggregate side yard setback of 30 feet where the minimum required aggregate side yard setback is 35 feet. We have the applicant here today.
Yes, I am Steven Zafuto, counsel on behalf of the applicant.
Do you have a product plan?
Yeah, I can get you one. Sure. Okay.
Okay, proceed, Stephen.
Okay, and at the outset, could I ask to use one of the board's copies of the application for the,
Yeah.
Thank you.
You got what you need?
Yes, thank
Okay,
you.
thanks.
Okay, so as stated, the applicants are Jeremy and Irene Michael. The property at issue is 180 Wentworth Lane, zoned R3 residential. It's on a 10,150 square foot lot, and the use of the property is single-family detached dwelling. The property fronts onto Wentworth Lane, and the applicant proposes to construct a 7-foot wide mudroom addition to their dwelling. In order to construct the addition to the dwelling as proposed, the applicant requests a variance from section 280-25D91 to permit an aggregate side yard setback. I'll read what it says. To permit an aggregate side yard setback of 30 feet where the minimum required aggregate side yard setback is 35 feet. That's what was included in the notice. I've since wanted to bring to the board's attention that the relief that we're asking for is to construct the 7-foot wide mudroom, so it would be 7 feet from the existing foundation exterior to the exterior of this mudroom addition. The site plan was drawn, measured from property markers and not by GIS survey. So there may be, I guess, just to be overly cautious, the measurement in that from the side yard setback on the side where the mudroom will be located is shown on the plans to be 15 feet. That's by field measurement, and that's where the 30-foot aggregate side yard setback comes from as well. But there may be a de minimis difference if accurately surveyed. So I just wanted to point that out. I don't know if the board would want to somehow, if the board were to decide to grant this relief, would want to word the grant of relief in a certain way. So I will present testimony tonight from Elizabeth Springer, a certified engineer who drafted the plans. She could explain that in a little bit more detail, as well as Jeremy Michael, the owner of the property. What the testimony and other evidence will demonstrate is that the proposed addition is a reasonable use. Strict application of the ordinance would create a hardship on the applicant, and that the applicant has not himself or have not themselves caused this hardship. All right, and first I would call Jeremy Michael. Be sworn in.
Does it work? Okay. I had patients with COVID yesterday, so I'm just out of abundance of caution. I don't want to unmask. I'm trying. Okay. Is it good? Okay. Okay. Oh, yes. Yes. Jeremy Joseph Michael, Jeremy. Middle name is Joseph. Last name is Michel.
Jeremy, you're the legal owner of the property, correct?
Yes, with my wife.
Could you just explain in your own words to the board why you wanted to add this mudroom to the house?
Okay. Our front entryway has no closet space or area to add a closet space. It goes directly onto the front stairs. There's about... Okay. Can I just stand back a little bit then? Okay. Sorry, just with the amount of patients I had with COVID, I don't like... Okay, slow. Our front entryway has no closet space or area to add a closet space, and goes almost directly onto the stairs to the next floor of our home. The area gets very crowded with school bags, shoes, coats. I put 12 hooks onto the wall, and we still, especially in winter, will use that area completely. A mudroom would allow us to solve that issue. And also with the amount of books and bags there, it's a concern for safety with trying to get in and out of the house. Building onto the side of the house to create the mudroom would allow us to address another safety issue, which is the side door of our house opens directly into our oven, so that basically the door, you can't open the oven and the door at the same time, making it really impossible to use the side door of our house to get in a reasonable way. Building the mudroom in the location would allow us to reconfigure the side entrance and improve the safety of that entranceway as well, and allow us to solve both issues at once. There's no the nearest closet to any of the entrances is a single hall closet. It's located about 25 feet from the front door and from the side door, making it very not an ideal location to put anything, really. That's the main reason for doing it.
The application A1.
Yeah.
We'll mark this A2.
Application
Well, just to make this quick.
Excuse
could
me for a second, I'm sorry. We're just identifying some exhibits.
Oh,
Mr.
yes.
Zafuto, do you
Why don't we
intend?
make the site plan as separate?
Yeah. Do you intend to refer to any of the attachments to the application separately? Probably Ms. Springer's testimony?
Yes, so the site plan.
Okay, so we'll identify some of these attachments separately. So the application will be A1.
And we'll go with A2.
Sure, yeah.
I would say the application, the background, the list of witnesses, all are included in A1. The photograph is A2. Deed is A3. Bear with us, it's housekeeping night here. The existing site plan is A4. I did that again, sorry. The proposed site plan is A5. And I think that takes care of the application. And then the photographs that were just handed up can be A6.
There's actually photographs of the property from the street and neighboring properties. There was a packet of 6 photos. Was that? Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, my apologies. That'll be A6.
So
And the
these
new
photos-
photograph handed up of the unfortunately placed back door, side door, excuse me, is A7.
Yeah.
That's correct. Thanks, John.
All right, and just quickly, Jeremy, can you describe what's shown in these photos?
Sure. This is our side door opening into the oven, and if I were to pull the side door open, you'd see the mark on the oven where it hits the oven. I didn't take a picture with the oven open, but it goes hits halfway up the oven.
And this one?
That is a representation of our front area.
Referring to A8.
A8, okay. That is a representation of our front entryway with our boots and just our kids' clothing and our clothing. So not even any of their friends who have come over and dumped their stuff in our front entryway.
Okay, and you took these photos?
Yes.
Okay. Could you quickly describe how you plan to furnish and configure the mudroom?
Sure. So what we're planning to do is if we had that 7 feet off, we would reposition the door so that it obviously did not hit the oven. That we would have it opening onto a bench where we would be able to put stuff as we're coming into the house and keep the area safe and clean. Storage below the bench, cubby spaces above the bench, and then on the other wall, pantry area or cabinets would be the main things.
So it's all functional space?
Yes.
Will the exterior of the mudroom addition blend in with the exterior of the existing dwelling?
Yes, we're planning to match the siding on the second level and kind of have it look like it was intended to be there.
When did you purchase the house?
May of 2013.
Okay, and have you added any width to the existing dwelling since then?
No.
What is currently in the area where you propose the mudroom addition?
A lilac bush, 2 garbage cans, the concrete like entry thing before you get to the house. I don't remember what that's called, and then our grill.
Okay, and with regard to the property, the neighboring property on that side of your dwelling, is there privacy screening between the mudroom location and the home on that neighboring property?
Yes, there's a full row of arborvitaes.
And have you spoken to any of your neighbors about this application?
Yes, numerous times. We've all kind of talked about it. They've all submitted letters of support, and that none of them had any issues with the addition of the mudroom. Oh yeah, thank you for reminding me. One of our neighbors was actually the one who's on the side of the house nearest to it was the one who initially suggested to us, and like just like the whole idea of building it kind of came up from one of the times we were just hanging out on their property.
Okay, and what address is the property adjacent to that side of your property?
I hate this part. I believe it's 182 if I count up.
Okay, so not to spend too much time on these, but the letters of support are from the residents and owners of 182 Wentworth Lane, 179 Wentworth Lane, and 178 Wentworth Lane. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Both
And
neighbors to the sides and the one across the street, the people who would be able to see it.
If the relief is granted, if the relief you're seeking is granted, will you agree to comply with all building codes and outside agency requirements?
Yes, I'm a very big rule follower.
Okay. That's all the questions I have for this witness. If the board has any questions, you could proceed.
Are there any other buildings or any other houses around you that have a similar mudroom, either when the house was built originally or added?
Many of the houses have some type of thing. I don't know if anybody has this specific type of mudroom. I don't know. Like, entryway to store stuff is definitely in many things, and a lot of the people have something so that they don't have to be like entering directly into their kitchen, or like have a place to put stuff when they get in their house.
Do some of the neighboring properties have garages?
Yes, they do. We do not have a garage. We knew that a garage was not going to be possible with the location, unfortunately.
From the board for Jeremy? Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you for your time.
And now I'll call Elizabeth Springer.
Yes. Elizabeth Goodall Springer, Springer. May I use your site plan?
Yes.
Thank you. So I performed the site plan that is in your packet, and we conducted that on just what we thought was going to be just a simple non-stormwater plan. We had a deed. Jeremy could identify the property markers. It's just going to be a straightforward situation. He had done some preliminary research on the zoning. It looked like he only had to be 15 feet off. So we performed a basic site plan, and as we started to put the pieces together, we pulled from some pins that are kind of toward the front of the yard at the right-of-way. And as you can see in this particular lot, the minimum lot area is 10,000 square feet, and they just squeak by at 10,150. And the minimum property width is 70 feet, and they're 70 feet. So basically what happens when you're at all of these, when you're just meeting all the mins, is that it doesn't leave you a big building envelope. And when you look at the building envelope, which is the setback lines, front, rear, sides, all put together, you can see it pretty much forms the structure itself. And in where we measured it from, it appears that it even crosses and makes the right side of the house non-conforming. Now, we all know as Radnor Township residents, I'm a Radnor Township resident, I live right down the street from Jeremy, you know, familiar with the Garrett Hill area, the diversity of the homes and types of living there. We know that many of our homes in Radnor Township violate setbacks, sometimes because of the age at which they were built, sometimes just by the nature of the lot, which is why there's variances in place. So this is not uncommon to see variances requested for properties, because we often find that, you know, we tell residents all the time, you know, don't be surprised until a site plan or survey is done. You may think you own a part of your property, you may think your property lines are someplace and they might not be. Well, this is one of those cases. Jeremy located his pins and we pulled everything from the pins. So we didn't do a formal GPS or GIS survey. We measured to the driveway and then from the driveway to the house. And this is the information that we found on the property. So basically, for Jeremy to do any sort of addition on his property, to the left, right, front, rear, he has to request relief. So you can see that his front porch violates, the right side of his house, at least the chimney violates, and the setback line nearly touches the left side of his home. So we are here requesting permission to build a 7-foot wide mudroom, because it's kind of like the bare minimum you can do before you just can't operate within the space. You figure your cabinetry is at least 2 feet deep, or a closet, if you want 2-foot space on the inside, you then need, you know, 4 inches, 4.5 inches of wall width, plus ability to move around, plus the thickness of the wall itself. It really just gives enough for one person and maybe a child behind you to kind of sneak around. So 7 feet is kind of the absolute minimum. And if you were to say, well, you know, is that standard? Well, my answer would actually be no, it's actually less than standard. I don't propose 7-foot mudrooms to people because it just doesn't, when the space is built, it's always a lot smaller. Nobody ever calls me and says, Liz, you designed a space that was too big for me. Like they always say, I needed more, but yeah, the answer is my zoning restricts me or my budget restricts me. And this is one of those situations where the zoning is restricting him for having a mudroom and he doesn't have any other place to put it. So we looked at a place that was least, you know, wasn't going to violate the front yard setback. We set it back by the kitchen where it could take care of the oven situation. And he has a lovely row of arborvitae to provide privacy and a good relationship with his neighbors. So that's kind of where we are right now. Any questions?
Yeah, Elizabeth, I have a question.
Yes.
So I think you mentioned this, but if you're looking at the front of the house,
Mm-hmm.
on the left-hand side, that's where the addition's going, right?
Correct.
And it looks like on that side that with the patio and the concrete walk, you know, they're in violation now, right?
So
Of the setback.
the patios don't typically create the violation. It's usually the structure.
Yeah.
So you can put patios there. We are going to be
Depends what kind,
removing those. So in other words, the footprint of the structure is not actually the total increase of impervious, because we are removing impervious surface to be able to put this in. But patios typically and driveways, they can violate your building envelope setback.
But the wooden deck on the back of the house could violate setbacks because decks affixed to the structure.
Yes, I guess they could, yes.
Do
Right now,
violate.
this particular one is in line with the side of the house. So Radnor Township has the code that if you have an existing nonconformity, you can maintain that as long as you don't increase that nonconformity. So the deck is in line with the side of the house on the left, and it is in line with the back of the house on the rear. So right now, the deck would be meeting that current code still.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Just as a formality, would the board have any objections to Mrs. Springer being admitted as an expert? if, I believe you're familiar with her credentials and experience, but I could
think
have
you've-
her testify.
I don't know if we need her to be an expert. She prepared the plans, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would certainly think she's an expert, though, by the way.
Like I said, a formality. She made things very easy on me, so I had to say some words. Okay, at this point, I'd motion to move our exhibits into the record.
Motion approved. Any other questions, board members? Any public comment? Seeing none. I'll ask for a motion from the board on the application.
I'll make the motion. I move that we grant the request for a variance from Section 280-25, capital D, point number 1 in parentheses, to permit an aggregate side yard setback of 30 feet, where the minimum required aggregate side yard setback is 35 feet, in order to construct the proposed mudroom that has been presented in the plans that were made part of the record here tonight.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Okay, I'll call a vote. John Nagel? John?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And I'm also in favor, 4-0 in favor of the application. Good luck with your project, and have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next meeting is this coming Monday. Can't stay away. So we'll see you all then. Meeting adjourned.
Must-see TV out there. Must-see TV.